Hi, this is Si from Music Radar, and we're here today to take a first look at Ableton Note. Note is the first app from Berlin developers Ableton, who are best known for their DAW Live, which has been around for just over 20 years. There have been rumours about Ableton getting into the iOS game for a few years now, and a lot of users have wondered whether Ableton will ever bring out a version of Live for the iPad, particularly now that iPad Pros have processors in them that match those in some of the MacBooks. So first, it's worth saying right from the off, Note is not Live for the iPad. Although it shares some similarities with the DAW, Note is essentially a sketchpad, the idea being that it's somewhere that live users or budding music makers can start ideas and then take them into Ableton's DAW for turning into full tracks later on.
Ableton Note lets us jam with clips, scenes and 8 tracks of MIDI. Note's workflow is based around Live's clip launching session view. It can host 8 MIDI tracks along the top, running from left to right across the interface. Each track has its own sound selection at the top and 8 clip slots running below it. As with Live Session View, these clips can be triggered in rows as scenes or triggered individually. Each clip can be up to 8 bars long, and users can add new clips, move clips, duplicate, and simply delete. A button along the bottom of the interface brings up a basic mixer view, where we can adjust levels for each track, mute, and solo. What we can't do is create complex arrangements. Exporting audio in Note will render a file with your 8 scenes running in order from 1 through to 8. But that's the extent of the arrangement tools. Unlike Live, there's no complex arrangement timeline. We also have no follow actions, which in Live allow us to set how loops re-trigger so we're limited to playing our 8 scenes in order. Note lets us create sounds with some of Live's staple devices. Let's open up a blank set here. Note's tracks make use of a range of preset instruments, each of which are based on Live devices. Sounds come in 3 forms: drum kits, synth sounds, and sample sounds. These are based on Live's drum racks, wavetable synth, and simpler devices respectively. And when exported to Live, your projects will open up with the full versions of the devices. Each preset also comes with 2 send effects. Again, these are based on devices from Live, such as the basic delay, reverb, saturator, and EQ tools. All instruments and effects have 8 macro parameters for adjusting the core sound, and these change depending on the preset being used. The most notable omission from Note at version 1 is that we can't work with audio. That means we can't import full loops or record audio clips. Note's workflow involves finger drumming and jamming around scales. All pattern inputs in Note are made using this grid which is used to trigger drum sounds or melodic sounds around a scale. We can set the scale and BPM in the settings window here. We can also trigger a metronome, which will help us build our first beat. The recording process uses workflow similar to Live's capture system, whereby users can jam with pads and the app will remember the last round of inputs. There's also a note repeat function for creating rolls and quick fills. However, right now we can't use a MIDI controller with Note. So even if you have an iOS compatible controller, at the moment we're limited to just using the virtual pads for Note inputs. We can quantize, and we can edit our MIDI inputs. This edit window lets us nudge hits right and left on the timeline, transpose them up and down to different pads or notes, or quantize various beat divisions. We can also edit velocity, either of selected notes or groups. Note also lets us record automation. With play running, we can simply adjust any of our macro parameters and then hit add if we want to capture the movement. The same goes for effects. We can double the length of the clip by dragging. Although users can't record audio directly into clips, Note can sample, either using the pad slots in its drum machines or a standalone sampler instrument. This can be done using either the device's own mic, by plugging a compatible mic or input into the Lightning connector, or by loading an imported sample. Users can import samples to their desktop machine This is one of a few ways that Mac users get a slightly better deal than Windows ones, although to be fair, this is more to do with Apple than Ableton. This is because it's possible to airdrop sounds from Mac, whereas PC users will need to manually transfer sounds to the files folder on their device. Here we can import a sample that we've already airdropped over. As well as recording clips freeform, we can also set a length for an empty clip. While Note enables us to edit patterns using MIDI events, it's not currently possible to create them. This means it's not possible to offline sequence, meaning we can't say add an empty clip and then create a pattern from scratch without playing it in from the pads. This is likely to suit the workflow of some users more than others. If you're someone who likes to, say, input drum patterns using a mouse or generate riffs with a step sequencer, Note workflow might mean changing your creative approach a little. This becomes more of an annoyance when using Bluetooth headphones, which create a significant amount of latency. Again, this is an issue caused by the technology rather than Ableton's app itself. However, it does mean it can be quite hard to accurately capture ideas if you're using something like AirPods or Bluetooth headphones. And a significant amount of quantizing and editing is required to get ideas down. Key to Note's appeal as a sketchpad is its ability to render ideas created in the app to its DAW sibling for more in-depth editing. Any project in Note can be exported to Live and opened in any version of Live later than 11.2, which is the latest update released alongside Note. There are a few ways to go about transferring these. Again, Mac users get the best deal here, as they can simply airdrop projects from the device to desktop. All users, however, can make use of Ableton Cloud. This allows registered users to store up to 5 Note projects online and access them from any device in order to transfer them between different versions of the Note app and desktop. When opened in Live, Note projects open as full DAW sessions. Instrument using the app open as their Live app counterparts, i.e. a drum rack, wavetable or simpler device, with full versions of the sound effects. Clips are opened as fully editable MIDI clips. However, while we can export projects from Note, we can't currently import them. This makes sense and is hardly surprising given how much more complicated a Live session can be than a Note one. However, it'd be nice as a little wish list for the future to see some way to take ideas we've created in Live and expand on them by sketching new riffs or melodies or variations on the go.
So that's essentially what we can and can't do with version 1 of Ableton Note. You can, to an extent, create full projects with these 8 scenes here, each of which can contain clips of up to 8 bars. You can kind of sketch out a full track, although there's no arrangement view editing like there is in Ableton on your desktop machine. And we can't use things like follow actions to loop or re-trigger clips automatically. So it's kind of a basic sketchpad. Some of the limitations we mentioned might mean that it won't suit every user's workflow right now. If you're someone who relies on audio a lot, looping either samples or clips or playing your own instruments, you probably won't get that much out of Ableton Note at this present time. Similarly, if you're someone who likes to offline sequence or make use of things like sequencing, MIDI tools, arpeggiators, or just drawing in your riffs and beats on a grid rather than playing them by hand, you might find that Ableton Note doesn't necessarily suit the way you work. That being said, it's a lot of fun and it is a cool way to generate ideas. Undoubtedly, the most appealing aspect of it for live users is the fact you can sketch out things like beats, riffs and melodies on the go, and then have them imported as proper sessions in your DAW. If you're someone who's toyed with the idea of getting Ableton Live before, it might be a nice little gateway, letting you play with sounds from drum racks and wavetable and some of the sampled instruments to get to grips whether the clip launching workflow and the sounds suit the type of music you want to make. That said, for a lot of users, Ableton Note might be 1 or 2 updates away from being essential. From talking to Ableton, we get hints that things like audio and other sequencing methods are on the roadmap. And once these are added, Note is likely to become an essential tool for almost all live users. It's cheap, it's a lot of fun, and it's easy to use. It's a great way to inspire ideas. Right now, it might not suit your workflow personally, but it's definitely worth having a play with.